and welcome to this 8th webinar in the Future of Research webinar series on the topic of curation and creativity. Data and insights are our richest resource, but how do we ensure as organisations that we're making the very best use of that information? In this webinar, we will learn about how we can draw together very disparate data sets, information sources and ideas in order to create powerful narratives which drive action within organisations, leveraging all the insights and knowledge that your company has to address evolving business questions. If you do have questions during the webinar, do put them in the chat because we will have time for a Q&A right at the end of the session. But now what I'd like to do is to introduce you to the speakers for today. We have my colleagues, Anne and Paul, who will talk separately about curation and creativity. Also, we are really lucky to have 2 pre-recorded videos from 2 of our clients, which we have worked with on curation projects, Anna Perna from L'Oreal and James from GSK, who will both talk differently about projects where they've used curation and the impact it's had within their organisation. But now I'd like to hand over to Paul to get us kicked off. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Pippa, and thank you for that introduction. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the session. As Pippa said, we're going to talk about 2 related topics in this afternoon's presentation. First of all, we'll talk about curation, the idea of distilling new insights from rich data sources, and Arne will primarily talk about that. We have 2 fantastic case studies from L'Oreal and from GSK, real-world examples of curation in action. And then finally, I'll come back towards the end of the session and talk about creativity and how it is that we need to think about not just our message, but the medium through which we deliver it. However, before we go to any of those places, I'd like you to indulge me for a moment. I'm going to take you, if I may, to a happy place. Now, this year has been extraordinarily challenging for all of us. And one of the things that has suffered, I'm sure, is your holiday plans. We've all seen things like this. But what I'd like you to do is I would like you to think, notwithstanding these images, of the last really great holiday that you had. Maybe even close your eyes and put yourself back into that last really great holiday. Now, I hope what I've then done is to put you into a happy place. As I said, you're remembering it with warmth and affection. And I'd like you to indulge me a little bit further, if you wouldn't mind. If you've got a paper and pen to hand, could you just jot down for me the 6 words or phrases which would best sum up your holiday for you? So 6 words, 6 phrases that would just encapsulate what that holiday was all about, what it meant to you. Now, I'll give you a moment or 2 to do that. Just be jotting a few thoughts down. You'll see where I'm going with this in a minute or 2. So hopefully you've had a chance to jot some words down, jot some phrases down. And I'm going to share with you my holiday, if I may, my last great holiday. Perhaps initially in a few more than 6 words, in fact, a whole screen full of words. And these are all phrases, words that I would associate with my last great holiday. And you're now confronted with a screen full of words. And I guess if I gave you long enough, you'd begin to find some patterns and make some sense of them. But if I do what I asked you to do and select 6 words or phrases to sum that holiday up, we'd get something rather different. So here are 6 words and phrases that would sum up my holiday. Not perhaps necessarily exactly what yours would have been like, but a summary, or I might have done this. 6 more words or phrases to sum up that same holiday. Very different and perhaps a different sense of it. Or I could do what I actually asked you to do, which is to try and capture the essence of it, what it really meant to you. And hopefully that 6 words or phrases gives you more of a sense of why I remember it so warmly and what was so important to that holiday for me. Now, I imagine you're saying I signed up for a curation and creativity seminar and I'm hearing about Paul's holiday. Bear with me 1 second and I'll try and explain what I'm doing here. So what I did when I gave you that big screen full of words was to give you a sea of data, if you will, a whole mountain of data. And then I curated some of the content, some of those data into little narratives. The first narrative, the one about roads and about service areas might have been what I would share with you if you were transport consultants and wanted to know about my holiday. If you were geographers and wanted to know about my holiday, my second set of 6 words might have worked. Or if you were friends who actually wanted to know about my holiday and where I went and how I felt about it, well, you'd have gone with the 3rd set. So what I was doing was, as it were, curating a whole series of different potential narratives from the same mass of data. And that's one of the things that curation is all about. So having set up that introduction, I'm now going to hand on to Arne, who will begin to move this all into the research and insights world. So Arne, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everyone. So Paul, I think your illustration actually is the perfect intro to today's topic, which we've entitled Curation and Creativity, Making More of Your Research Investment. I guess everyone on this call at one time or another has been bombarded with information. I've certainly heard this term infobesity on more than one occasion in conversations, whether with colleagues or clients, and also more recently, the pandemic effect, when one's had to review their business questions or strategies to adapt to a very, very rapidly changing world. And because we may not always be in a position to do more primary research, wanting to draw meaningful conclusions and actions from the data we already have at hand is certainly a viable option. And this is where curation comes in. There's many ways one could talk about curation. I usually fall on the simple explanation because it's the one that sticks most to me. So curation is gathering a hand-picked collection of content from a variety of sources around a specific topic that you publish and share with others. Others read it, and because they find it useful, they use it. And because they find it useful, they share it on. And others use it and share it on. And on and on and on it goes. So we've seen that curation is gaining quite a lot of importance in organization because actually it makes very good business sense. By looking at the collective intelligence in a new way, you can really create great impact. And that could be financial impact because you're saving money and time using existing knowledge in your organization. Also collaborative impact because you're raising the profile of these very simple insights which can be used in the whole of your organization. So curation is super powerful because it enriches a lot of the different facets that we know makes up a business. So for example, without doing any primary research, we needed to paint a picture of what a dining scene could look like in the future, because we wanted to inform a robust innovation and communication roadmap for one of our clients' brands. What we did is our curators held a roundtable event with food experts to discuss their view of the future over dinner. Collaborated also with the different Ipsos curators and also the brand managers around the world to understand why certain eateries were quite hot in their cities at that particular time. And by doing this, we were able to extract the real enduring elements and catalysts of change that helped shape a future forward strategic roadmap for that brand. Also, by mining a last 24 months reports and speaking to a variety of experts, we used a cultural framework to inspire a big idea and definitely support the creative development process for a big pharma company that up to that point had been struggling to develop a successful global communication campaign for 4 of its key lead markets. And it really paid off. From another angle, you could even use things like global trends to even future-proof for your existing segmentation, for example. And I could go on and on and on about how you could apply the power of curation for your business. But perhaps let's listen to the very first video that Pippa talked to us about earlier on. It's from Dr. Kapar, the R&I director at L'Oréal Air Care Métier in Asia, who shot a short video for us on how they actually use curation with great effect in their innovation process. You'll see the video in the new pop-up window, and that's absolutely normal. See you later.
In innovation, classic research doesn't really bring us unusual connections. And that's why we were interested in looking at curation. We were looking at aging, which is a huge opportunity for many companies. And we have a lot of resident knowledge as well on this category. So the idea was one, to of course bring a whole new lens to the existing knowledge, plus infuse it with a lot of outside curation, from very unusual, from very disparate sources, so that it would help us to build a completely new view of aging. So what did curation entail? The approach required us to work as a team in close partnership with the agency, both client and agency together. There's a lot of transparency to share what we had in terms of resources, not just data in-house, but also contacts outside, to talk to people, to talk to experts who were completely, in some cases, not aligned with beauty industry at all. So the idea was to try and work together. There was also stakeholder interview. So there was a lot of time given by senior management to exchange what was the expectation from the exercise and how is it that we were really planning to activate the learnings of curation. The big benefit really for us from curation was it that helped us to connect dots, which were from very different aspects, very not just within beauty industry, like I said earlier, but from outside of beauty industry. It brought together data from very disparate sources, right from consumer evaluation data, to clinical data, to qualitative data, to digital data, and to of course augment it with expert interviews, which really helped to completely rejig and re-energize our views towards aging. Overall, how did L'Oreal feel about curation? It was a very useful approach. It helped us to understand the social shifts and to look at the sophistication of solutions available outside of the industry, within consumers' lives, and it really brought in a whole new way of working for us in that sense. It helped to generate a couple of concepts for innovation, which were not just product ideas, but they were services, they were business models, they were new benefit segments. So it was overall quite a useful exercise for us. I think it's important to go beyond classic research, especially today when there are multiple data sources available. Synthesizing data is a given and everybody can do it. So it's not just about audit or synthesizing of data, but it's about really trying to bring in a completely new energy to that subject, looking at it from a lens which you've never probably looked at before, and trying to not go linear on solutions, try to be lateral, try to be different, and that is where curation really helped. Thank you.
I think I'm back. So thank you. So the type of curation Dr. Kapar kindly shared with us is what we coin research without research at Ipsos. Simply put, it's about joining those disparate dots on a particular topic, very much, as Dr. Kapar's example, and also as Paul's holiday example. And when we're doing this, our curators connect with different experts. So there could be data analysts, anthropologists, semioticians, academics, designers, even the experts within your own organizations, just to ensure that the dots we're joining take into account the broader context. Because it's the broader context within which people live that is important. It's a broader context which we know shapes how people behave. The broader context is also attached to your forever evolving business questions or strategies, even the ones for your brands. So we curate to create a full and objective picture of what's going on. We curate to extract the so what for your organization. We curate to keep everyone on their business toes. We also curate to find new ways to differentiate ourselves. In a recent example, for example, one of our new clients wanted to know how they could best use photographic imagery to have people read their news stories rather than competitors. And by analyzing a plethora of publications in different countries with a semiotic lens in this instance, Our curators found that the story should be framed by imagery that echoes the cultural fabric of those countries. So simply put, for our clients in Brazil, they needed to dial up the melodrama and give the photos a cinematographic feel. Whilst for a country like Turkey, people usually responded to graphic realism because that culturally translates into objective reality. So before I hand over to Paul again, I'll leave you with another short video that James Sallows, the head of capability and transformation at GSK, shot for us on this very topic, the importance of curation within GSK Consumer Health.
I think when we looked at the number of projects, we were at something like 6,000 projects over the last 2 years. So, I mean, the scale is huge. And if you think about the sum of that knowledge, I mean, already in financially it's millions, but the value of that knowledge is even greater when you start to consider from a curation point of view, that's your baseline. So it's no longer your output, it's the baseline for your future outputs. And really for us, that's where we see the value is, how do we start to raise our collective intelligence in insights so that when we're doing new things, they are genuinely new and not just new to that particular category or that particular brand or that particular moment. So yeah, when we think about examples of curation from an internal point of view, we've got really good examples where we've used that kind of collective knowledge, such as our new innovation process, where the start point is looking across everything to see what we know before we move forwards and getting above kind of that sometimes narrow view by brand. I think collectively, one of the most powerful examples of curation recently has been looking externally. So during the COVID crisis, in those early weeks, we were faced, as I think everybody, with a deluge of information. Everyone wanting to know what's going on, but also lots of companies offering a point of view or some data about what's going on. And when you consider that we've probably got 120 insights professionals and all of them have their inboxes flooded, how do you cut through? And including our marketing colleagues with similar messaging, how do you cut through and how do we decide actually as a business, where are we focusing? What are we going to do in this crisis? So we actually partnered with Ipsos to create something that we named the Spotlight. And the idea is that every week we would focus in on a particular area of the crisis and bring it to light with all of the different data points, stories, articles, whatever it might be. And I think that gave us a huge opportunity to really provide a source of knowledge to the business. As I mentioned, the Spotlight really started as a general update on where we were. But what became really powerful was people started to take ownership of it. So we ended up having guest editors every week who represented a particular point of interest or a function or a topic. So for example, maybe sustainability. Maybe it was recessionary behaviours. We had a really good thing about behavioural science in one of the features. So really taking it down and starting to get from a general update down each week into very kind of niche but really rich updates with links out to articles, best thinking, thought leadership, that people could go and enrich themselves. I think one of the things about curation is if you're going to put all the effort into bringing it together, don't stop there. What you really need to think about is, well, how does it go on to live? What's the afterlife of your curation? What's the renewable? What are the points of interaction? I think a couple of examples, I think with the Spotlight, we already thought about, okay, how do we take this down into specific themes, invite people to come in and share with us? But actually there's another example of work that we've done internally within the oral health category. It's an amazing ethnographic project called Silk Road. I personally can't take credit for it because it was run by Sibylla and Alexandra within that category, who did an absolutely amazing job on the project. And what that was looking at was really spending time with consumers day to day in 3 Asian markets and having video diaries and collating that together to get some really deep insights and understanding. And now, if you can imagine the hundreds of hours of video that entails, there's a lot of investment in that, not just the filming time, but also the curation time of cutting that down into chunks, but also the value of the bits you didn't edit in. And I think when you look at that, you realize that there's an importance as to how it gets used, how often it gets used, and the impact it can have. So when that project finished. There was already a plan put together by the team as to how to ensure it continues being used over the next year. So for all of last year, there was a communication plan around Silk Road where there's an entire deck with some slides that equip the presenter to understand how to get the most out of the interaction with their audience, how to bring them in to the lives of these individuals, and also how to share the video, not just the video you're showing, but to give access people to the Big Sofa platform, for example, for curating the video. So allowing people to search themselves for things that they find interesting amongst that huge volume of video. And that really helped it go on to be something that we still talk about today as a project. And to be frank, we still dip into it as a project.
So thanks to James Sallows for making that film for us and sharing those two really great examples. What I want to do now is to take us into the second of our themes. So we talked about this session being about both curation and creativity, and I hope what James's examples, both those curation examples, show how these two things link together. Before I dive into some reflections, though, I'd like to just go back to my original example and perhaps to your hard days too. So you wrote down those 6 words, those 6 phrases, and it might be that if I'd asked you about your holiday, that's what you would have said to me. Alternatively, you might have said, oh, I've got my phone with me, here are some photos. And that might be a much better and more creative way and a more engaging way of actually telling me about your holiday. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get to here, that we're thinking both about the message, the thing we've curated, and the medium, the creative way in which we're going to deliver that. Now, you will all be acutely aware of the competition for attention that goes on in this digital world, and even more pronounced, of course, at the moment when things are popping up on our screens, when we're working from home and there are distractions around us. The competition for attention, for our insights to cut through, for our learnings to cut through is acute. And so we need to work really hard to think about how do we make sure that we get the right things into the hands of the right people at the right time. So of course, we need to have the right data. Of course, we need to have curated the right message, but that in and of itself is nowhere near enough. What we need to do is to start thinking about who our audience is. Who am I trying to communicate with? What's their preferred medium? How much time have they got? How do they like to consume information? What's on their mind? And if we start asking ourselves those questions when generating our outputs, when generating our deliverables, the chances that we'll tell them what they need to know rather than everything we've got to say will be much more powerful. So what we're looking at here is what is it that really matters? What's right at the heart of what we're trying to say? And this is one of those classic cases where we may have a sea of data, but we want to give people the absolute essence of what they need for their business decision, for their business challenge. And we also need to think about when we deliver it to them. James's Silk Road example was great in this case. You had bite-size little single pages or single emails that would just give someone a snippet of something and came out on a regular basis. You had short 5-minute snacks that people could consume at their leisure whenever they wanted to go to them, or even go to the Big Sofa platform. And then finally, you had meals. You had those lunch and learn sessions where people could come along, they could put time in their diary and really immerse themselves into a topic. So being timely with our deliverables. And that also brings us to our 5th theme here, which is the format of those deliverables. Now, it was nice and easy a few years ago. You did a few slides or you wrote a report, but now we've got such a rich array of media we can use and alternatives that we need to think very carefully about what is the best format. Is a podcast or a video best here? Do I want to send a PowerPoint presentation? Do I want to deliver it online like this? Lots of different things. And then finally, we also need to think about longevity. James again was talking about keeping insights alive within the organization. We need to be thinking about not just our big set pieces, but also what do we do after the set piece? How do we ensure that those insights are carried through the organization, that they stay alive, that they actually get embedded in business practice and in business process and generate genuine change? Lots of questions, many of which, of course, we'll have to answer on a case-by-case basis. But what I might like to do, if I may, is just sum up. And we started with 6 words, and I'm going to finish with 6 words as well, if I may. And the first of those 6 words is extraction. That's what curation is all about. It's about mining rich data to extract that which is of real value, which is relevant to today, which is relevant to our stakeholder audiences. Then it's all about packaging that data up in a way that will make it easy to consume, will make it engaging, will make it relatable. And of course, then it's about the actual delivery of it, both time and how that is done. And the how that is done, for me, falls into three broad headings. The first is, what do we do before? How do we raise expectations? How do we get people excited about what they're going to hear, even before it happens? Then, of course, there is the main event. What is the big set piece where we deliver what we want to deliver? But then, even more importantly, what happens afterwards? We don't just walk away, but we make sure that we've got strategies in place to ensure that our insights really capture the attention of our stakeholders, that our stakeholders then use them, and that they actually make a difference to our business. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that useful, and I'll hand back to Pippa.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you for a really interesting presentation, Arne and Paul, and also great to have Annapurna and James's personal experience of kind of working on curation projects and bringing that kind of curation projects to life in different ways. We have had a few questions, so I'm gonna let me just dig in. So Arne, I think this is for you. What's the difference between curation and desk research?
Okay, I'd say desk research is part of the curation process, and that curation goes beyond what desk research traditionally delivers. I think curation is an interactive process because we want to question, that collective knowledge by applying loads and loads and loads of different lenses to it. So semiotic lens, behavioral science lens, and then we question the so what is all of this data telling us by bouncing it off with different minds, so different experts, and injecting lateral thinking. So I think desk research is a good starting point, but it's not enough, and it's not curation. I think also, curation at Ipsos is we super obsessed, with people because we're in the people game. So the outputs are also super consumer centric. Of course, it's like I think that it doesn't mean that we don't take the business questions or the brand's objective at heart in our people obsession, but I think it offers a different perspective from the people that will consume the stuff we sell or make. And last but not least, I think it takes a little bit of a specific skill set to be able to create those sticky stories. And the curators, within our team, we're almost like the odd one out at times because we think differently. We're super creative at heart, and if we lack a skill, we definitely can dip into the broader Ipsos and find that person that's going to plug in that last little point. So that's how I would paint the difference.
And I think you're so right, Arne, because I know that that's not me. And I think curation is, being able to look beyond kind of the obvious, what the data's telling you, be able to link it all up and to be able to look at different layers of context. And I've definitely seen that in working with you and Paul in kind of on this webinar. So Paul, I'm going to ask you two questions in one. So you talked about, different ways of kind of delivering insight. How do you stop? So it's got two parts. How do you stop people drowning? But also, can you give some specific examples of kind of longevity? So how you've made things live on. So two parts.
Yeah. So how do you stop people drowning? By there not being too much water. So that's really unhelpful. I think the important thing is, in a way, the same principle that you're using with curation, which is you don't give everybody all the data, nor do you communicate it in all the possible ways that you can. You're curating your delivery just as much as you're curating your content. So I think people don't drown because you choose your delivery mode really carefully, you target it carefully in terms of length, duration, in terms of time when you send it to people. So, just simple things like just choosing which time of day you send something to somebody, they're more likely to open it rather than less. But fundamentally is what is the essence that you need to communicate, get that across, and then if people want more, they can come to you, leave them wanting more. So that would be the first thing. In terms of longevity, there's no one simple answer. I think the idea of campaigning things, so building expectation, leaving people wanting more, and then offering them more and providing them with more is a good way of doing it. But mostly what you want to do is what Anne was talking about, which is to generate advocates in the business, get people excited about your material, about your ideas, about your insights, and they'll, so it's an overused term, but they'll go viral. And that's what you're looking for. So I think ultimately you're trying to identify those people who buy into what you're doing, who are engaged by what you're doing, and then resource them to become your agents, become your advocates, and then just jump on the story and run with it as much as you can. But there's no obvious formula. It's just keeping your eyes and ears open and hoping for the best, not hoping for the best, but identifying when the opportunity is there and then running with it.
While you were answering that, I was thinking of a very literal example, because in my role in innovation, obviously we're looking sometimes to tech to help solve problems. And I know we very successfully used augmented reality, particularly for journey mapping or diaries. I saw some examples this morning, which is why I brought it to mind. But and I remember one of our clients actually had a huge poster put up in their boardroom, such that after the workshop, people could take their mobile phone, use the augmented reality, and kind of access videos and stuff. And they kept it on there for, as I understand, quite a long time while the kind of consequence or the next steps of that project went on. So I think tech, that was an example of where tech has kind of made those insights live.
Absolutely, and I think you can't overrate the value of being cool. I think, yes, of course, we've got great insight. Yes, of course, it should be enough in itself. But actually, if you make it fun to consume, you make it engaging to consume, people are more likely to consume it. That's the way we are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things we did on the GSK Spotlight project is we just made sure that it wasn't a linear navigation. We had like quite an interactive delivery, so that we know that people are always interested about different things. And the starting point, therefore, within that delivery could have been anywhere and everywhere. And we also made sure that we had like an ADD version of it by making sure that we've got in this week's Spotlight, these are the top, I think 5 or 6 points, boom, and that's the only thing certain people needed to know about. So it really depends on the audience. It depends also on your company culture. Some companies love loads of animations and videos, and that other ones have a more chill, if I can call it that way, type of culture, like a more restrained. And it's not in a negative way at all, but where suddenly you go all gun blazing with videos and VR, and people would go like, okay, it's capturing my attention, but I'm running away because I'm scared right now. So it's got to really fit a whole lot of criteria, which we discuss and collaborate with the client.
Cool. I have got another question for you, Anne, which is about, in your experience of having done kind of many curation projects, what are the essential ingredients which make a great curation project?
I think the magical ingredient is collaboration. I don't think it's yes, I don't know, 50,000 projects that we've done in the past before, and they dump it all on us, and off you go, and I'm looking forward to the output. I think as much as we've got a great team of curators within Ipsos, we need to form that team also with the client, because the client understands the business questions. I want to understand the business question as closely as he will. The client will very closely know also, how those business questions translate to either brands or services that they provide. And I think also that they know the company culture quite a lot. And I need to be able to debate what I have found, with them, because it might be a big aha moment for me, and it may sort of the client may sort of go, actually, yeah, but I don't know why this is relevant. And yet, through that particular debate, sometimes, you know, we go, oh, actually, we never thought of this. And this is a great reason as to why it is important for us to be able to think laterally like that. So I would say collaboration, magical ingredient. The second one is courage. Have the courage to go where your brand hasn't gone before, because often that is quite refreshing in a way to differentiate ourselves. And then I would almost say timely. I think when we deliver what we deliver, we need to also realize that the audience needs to be really primed for that particular delivery. Yeah, I would almost say that. And of course, loads of data, loads of connection. Speak to this one. I think he views things differently, and so forth. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I've got one. I think this is the final one for you, Paul. Well, it's a very practical question. What do outputs look like?
Oh,
very wide.
No, it's actually a really good question, and of course it's the classic one you want to know. What do I get? And the answer in this instance, I think, is you get what you want. I think Anne's already begun to talk about this. There's no one size fits all kind of curation output. I think it's a case of, you know, who is the target audience? What is it they need to know? What decisions do they need to make? How do we need to inform them? And you know, we curate the outputs just as much as we curate the content. And I think it's, you know, the days of, like I said in the session itself, the days of defaulting to PowerPoint, defaulting to a Word report, and of course we still reproduce those when they're the right thing. And there would certainly be some sort of data dump's the wrong word. There will be some sort of, you know, digest of everything that we've learned, which would be a thing you can hold on to. But the deliverables are as diverse, I hope, as the sorts of things that I talked about. And again, like Anne said, it's a case of a conversation about an individual project and what makes the best outcomes for that project. But if it doesn't involve some video somewhere, I think it's a bit of a shame.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just looking because they're messaging me questions. I think we'll wrap up there, but I think you know, people talk about curation, they talk about creativity, they talk about impact, which kind of feels sometimes quite kind of big words, and you're like, well, you know, what is it? What can I actually put my finger on? But I think, you know, we know that budgets are often under pressure. The ability to do as much primary research as we might want to do, but also the frustration that we do hear from clients that there's so much information, like you talked about on infobesity. There's going to be very few chances where, well, I think, you know, I would be surprised in any organization whether all of that insight and knowledge that resides in that organization has been farmed to its maximum, if you like, and used so that, you know, someone talked to me about those accidental insights when you start joining bits together and then things pop out, which, you know, you may then want to test. But really fascinating. Thank you ever so much, Paul and Anne, and also remotely to Annapurna and James for their contribution. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. This is the last webinar in October, but we have 4 more webinars in the first week in November where we will be touching on things like joining the data dots. We will be talking about the power of passive. We will be talking about keeping your finger on the pulse of the customer and consumer, and also about digital personas, about how we can use understanding about individuals for better and more effective targeting. So do go to futureofresearch.ipsos.com and you can sign up to those November webinars, and also the recordings for all of the previous sessions will be on there. So these October sessions will go on next week, but the September sessions are already on there to view. They're only about 40 minutes long. So please do enjoy those. And if you have any other questions, please do send them to us and we will answer them directly. Many thanks.